Well, thank you everybody for being here. So great to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces as well. My name is Lee Edelblue. I'm the Senior Program Coordinator at Hart Leadership. So I run the Hart Fellowship Program. If you haven't signed in yet, can you please scan this QR code and sign in? That would be great. So as I said, my name is Lee, and then with us today we have one of our current fellows, Kylan Walker. Kylan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey y'all, I'm Kylan. I know a couple of y'all said again. I'm a current fellow, as she said, in Durham, working with Durham Success Summit. Happy to be here.
We're recording this, so I'm just gonna turn these on and maybe point it at it. And it kind of will pick us up, but not too much. Yeah. Okay, great. Has everyone had a chance to sign the QR code? Okay, great. Okay. All good. Hello, welcome, come on in. All right. So tonight we're going to go over all things to do with the Hart Fellowship and the application. We'll run through what is the fellowship, what are the components of the fellowship year. We'll talk about who can be a Hart Fellow. Kylan will share a little bit about the fellowship experience, at least so far. And then we'll talk about application, timeline, and leave some questions for you. So to start off with, let's talk about what is the Hart Fellowship. Presumably, you guys know a little bit about it since you're already here, but the Hart Fellowship offers recent Duke grads an opportunity to embark on 10 months of working with organizations addressing complex social, political, and/or humanitarian issues. It's a capstone experience that allows you to develop your own ethical framework as you go into professional life. And Hart Fellows typically produce some type of community-based research and action project that has tangible benefit to the organizations that they're working with. And then along the way, you're engaging in structured, critical, reflective work. A couple numbers for you. We've had 118 Hart Fellows in the last 30 years. Kylan is part of our 30th class of Hart Fellows this year, so that's pretty exciting. And we've sent fellows to over 41 countries in those 30 years. There's another one. Just a brief history. We have been running this for 30 years. Over those 3 decades, Hart Fellows have engaged in myriad projects, ranging from documentary work in conflict zones to working with children in adversity, researching access to healthcare in rural communities, and even advocating for an Indigenous land guardianship network. These projects continue to play an important role in how we think and talk about the Hart Fellowship. And so as we're moving into this new application cycle, I would really encourage anyone who's thinking about applying to really dream big, to dream boldly and creatively about how you might make an impact and learn from a community that you hope to partner with. So the fellowship year kind of has 4 core components. There's a tangible contribution to a community partner. There's community-based research, which is done in tandem with that work in the community partner organization. There is working and engaging with the community of practice, and then there's also taking time for reflective practice as part of your leadership development. So what do we mean by community-based research and action? This is a little bit of a nuanced definition, but community-based research is essentially not going into a community and just doing whatever project you have in mind. It's actually taking time to listen and collaborate and find out what does this community partner need, what is the most important to this community. So as you're crafting your fellowship proposals, what we're looking for is some understanding of what you'd like to do, some ideas and passion about what you think is important to this community, what you want to research, but also an openness to collaborate, to listen. So community-based research and action really starts with listening. The first 2 to 3 months of the fellowship are really focused on having a lot of conversations, not only with people who are in that organization you're working with, but with individuals who live in the community, with the people that the community organization serves. So after you engage in this listening, you'll kind of come up with a new idea for what your internship, what your research project will look like. You then move into this research stage, and then hopefully at the end you'll have some meaningful contribution that you can give, some deliverable that is of tangible benefit to the organization. And along the way, you're also engaging in direct service for this organization. So you might be doing this research project, but you're also helping in some way as like a regular staff member for this organization. Anything to add to that?
No, I mean, yeah, just you don't have to come into this with your plan already completely down to every detail. It's going to change multiple times, and they kind of encourage it to change, and they encourage you to really just immerse yourself within whatever community you're in those first couple months.
And then the other two components of the fellowship year are deeply participating in this community of practice and engaging in reflective writing. So by community of practice, we mean a few different things. There's first the organization that you're working with, the some people that you're living with day to day, but then there's also the cohort of other fellows. And Kylan's going to talk a little bit about what that's looked like so far this year.
Yeah, the cohort is really special because it's a group that you're not going to see in person really at all outside of the orientation, but you still get very close with them. Like, we talk every day. I won't be surprised if my phone starts jumping because of our group chat. But they're all really awesome people, and it's a bunch of different work being done down a bunch of different avenues. So, for instance, we have somebody doing interfaith dialogue in the UK, and then we have somebody doing Brazilian like cultural practices and dance combat like moves. So those are two completely different things, but we're all going through this time, and we're like, this is tough. We're on our own. What are we doing? But we're with each other. It's a good time, and yeah, the community of practice is real.
Yeah. And we offer some structured ways for you to connect with this community or this cohort during the year as well. So we have monthly Zoom gatherings. And then the fellows also write field notes to each other each month, kind of updating, here's what's going on, and everyone's responding. And I think that that's really just interesting to see what's going on.
Yeah, it's a lot of support that you receive within the monthly Zoom meetings with the fellowship staff. They make sure that, you know, your voice is heard, and the issues that you're kind of wrestling with, they make sure that however they can help, they do. And the writing practices are just, as Lee said, good for reflection and kind of figuring out where you want to go as you continue down with the project.
Yeah. So for reflective writing, we have those field notes. Then we also have letters home, which fellows write each month. If you've done a Hart Leadership program before, you'll know what letters home are, of course. These are opportunities for you to take small moment reflection. So you might think about in the past month something small that has happened. And as you start writing about that small moment, you start thinking, how does this reflect the lessons I've been learning throughout this whole month or throughout this whole process? And as you're engaging in this critical reflection, you're learning things about yourself, but you're also able to pose questions because you're writing to a real person. And that person is our writing coach, Professor Suzanne Katzenstein. And Professor Katzenstein will write a letter back to you each month. So throughout the fellowship, you're getting these 10 letters back from Professor Katzenstein. You're writing them to her. You're developing a deep conversation. That is really crucial for individual growth throughout that year. We also have reflective writing or other writing assignments that are around your research. So you'll write research updates each month, which is an opportunity to provide the staff with an update on what you're doing, but also to get feedback and ask questions. I'm thinking about doing this. I would love to have some context in this area. I'm curious about this type of project, but I don't know exactly how to make it happen. How do I make this a reality? And our staff reads those reflections or reads those updates, and we provide those back to you. So that's a word about kind of, the different components. Our support team, who are responding to these different letters home and writing research assignments, are, of course, Professor Andrew Nurkin, who's the director of Hart Leadership Program. We also have Dr. Kate Wetton and Dr. Heath Wynn, who are a research director and advisor. So these are people who are really giving critical and core feedback on your research throughout the year. Professor Suzanne Katzenstein, as I mentioned, is our writing coach who responds to letter tone. And then Liz Driver helps with all of our financial needs and making sure that your receipts are accounted for throughout the year. And of course, everyone is probably very curious about funding and how the fellowship year is funded. So this is a fully funded 10-month research fellowship. Your living expenses, travel expenses, and research expenses are all covered throughout your fellowship year. We have limited funding, so it's not like an exorbitant amount of funding for you to live on, but it is definitely enough to cover your expenses throughout your fellowship. So just some examples of what we cover: housing, utilities, food, transportation, health insurance if it's needed, a flight to and from your host location, visa expenses, and then a small stipend for research expenses and language training. So lots of things covered. We work with you to create a budget. The funding is based on your location and the budget that you create, so it's not a set amount that every fellow gets depending on where they're going, but rather tailored to your specific location.
The funding, it is as much as you need. I would say that you're not gonna have to worry. You're not gonna have to pick up another job or anything. They make sure that they make sure that money is not a problem for you, and it also helps with just the personal skill of budgeting. Like if you're like me, before this I was a big splurge. So it helps you with, spending money on the right things, knowing how to save your money and balance it from month to month.
Great. So who can be a Hart Fellow? The answer is anyone. Hart Fellows are not all from the same major or interested in the same topic or even pursuing the same careers. Anyone can be a Hart Fellow, and when you're working on your application, we want to see who you are, the authentic you, not who you think we might want, because we're really curious about you as an individual. That said, there are qualities that many Hart Fellows share. Qualities such as curiosity, adaptability, openness, and resilience. Hart Fellows are often self-reflective, imaginative, respectful. They have a collaborative mindset, they're enthusiastic, and they are thoughtful communicators. And just a note on eligibility, if you are a current senior or you've graduated in the last 2 years, you are eligible to be a Hart Fellow. This includes international students and alumni, DACA recipients, and undocumented students and alumni. However, if you graduated before 2023, if you graduated from one of the grad schools or one of the professional programs, if you've already received an advanced degree after your undergrad, or if you're graduating from a different university, you're not eligible. And that counts even if you've taken classes at Duke, but your degree is under a different university. All right, and now Kylan's going to tell us a little bit more about his fellowship experience so far.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm in Durham. I'm working with Durham Success Summit, which is a local nonprofit here that's focused on youth empowerment, specifically with black males. So my day-to-day, it switches a lot, but for the most part, I'm usually at the Success Center on Magnum Street, just doing work with either the cohort that we have going on or just different work within the community. One project that I'm doing right now is a Thanksgiving drive within the community of Bragtown, which is a part of Durham that I didn't even know about before doing the Hart Fellowship. And so it's definitely been a lot of fun working with my community partner and seeing the different needs that they need as an organization, while also trying to balance out the research that I want to do and seeing like how to kind of find something in the middle where I'm successfully achieving, my own aims and goals as well as the organization's.
Yeah. And what is the research that you're focused on this year?
Yes, so the research that I'm looking into is how we can make educational spaces more inclusive and more open for minority students. It could be as simple as, what posters are on the walls in classrooms, or all the way down to, how represented do they feel when they walk in the classroom. And through this lens, I'm looking more specifically at like a community school or community youth-based led programs to look at how they kind of set the example, for maybe initiatives that we can try to include within public school systems.
So, Kylan, I think it would be helpful, maybe, if you could tell everyone a little bit about, like, what your time at Duke was like and how you ended up deciding to apply for the Hart Fellowship.
Yeah, so at Duke, I was a political science major, but I kind of stayed in Sanford with some of my classes, and so learned about Hart through Seoul. I actually did all the Hart programs because I just really liked them for how like tight knit you really get with the rest of the cohorts that you're in, and I chose Hart because it just personally seemed like the best opportunity for me moving on from undergrad. Like I knew I wasn't ready to go do more school at the time, and I knew I also wasn't ready to do any work as far as like in an office. So it was kind of like the perfect blend of still having structure and still being able to have support from, Duke, and also be able to do real work and real research while also developing my own community outside of Duke and all of those great people that I've met at Duke.
All right, so we went through all that information very quickly. I'm going to talk about the application now, and then we're going to leave a big chunk of time for you guys to ask your questions, so start thinking of those now. So there are several components to the application. The application's now live. I'm sure that you guys have seen the link in different email blasts already. But basically we have a fellowship proposal. This is a 750-word proposal where you talk about a community partner organization that you might be interested in working with, a topic that you're interested in pursuing, why this fellowship and why now and why you, and what you're hoping to learn and, get out of being in this program. We also have 3 short answer reflections. 2 of them are like a couple paragraphs, and then the last one is literally like 2 or 3 sentences. These are just an opportunity for us to get to know you a little bit more. We ask for a letter of recommendation, and then we also ask for 2 references. Those references should be different from the letter of recommendation. We'll ask for an updated resume and for your transcripts from Duke and from any other institutions you've attended throughout your undergraduate career, so study abroad as well. And the application timeline, our application is due on January 22nd. Finalists will be notified on February 5th, and then we'll move into interviewing. Interviews are typically around half an hour, and it's with most of the support team, and it's an opportunity for us to really dig into the research side a little bit more. Final offers will be made by February 21st, and the deadline is at the beginning of March. This is because we know a lot of you may be applying for other fellowship programs, and so hopefully this is in sync with anything else that you're applying to, so you have enough time to make the decision between anything else you're considering. And now we're going to move on to questions. So a couple helpful links on here. If you have any questions, feel free that you don't want to share in this conversation, or if we don't have time for them, you can always send them to the Hart Fellowship inbox. You can learn more at our website, and then feel free to schedule office hours with me on Calendly. But I'm curious what questions you all have for us. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. My question is, if I have an idea of a general space that I want to work in, like idea of the research I want to do, but I don't have a specific organization that I want to work with yet, or like confirmation that I could work there, can I still fill out an application without having that some time?
Yes. So the question is, you have a place in mind and a topic in mind, but not an organization. Is that right?
Yeah, or there's a list of organizations that I'm thinking about, but have not. Yeah, they haven't told me that I can have this job there necessarily. Yeah,
I would say that when you're putting together the proposal, it would be good to, beforehand, because you have 2 months to put together this proposal, so dig in a little bit to those different organizations on your list and think about which ones are the most aligned or which one is the one that you would most want to work for, and then write about that. By no means are you locked in to working with the organization that you write about in your proposal. Say that you write about something in a proposal, and then we invite you to interview, and you reach out to that organization, and it turns out that they can't host you for whatever reason. Maybe they're transitioning to an all-remote workforce and you want to be in person. That's okay. If your application is compelling and you as a person are compelling, there's still room for you in the program, and we'll help you find a new partner organization. This is pretty common, actually, not so much in that stage, but it happens pretty often. At least one person every year we've extended an offer of the fellowship to them, and then their organization has fallen through, and they've had to find somebody new. It's very normal. We're used to it, and we can help you navigate that. But for the application, I would say it's better to kind of start thinking about what you might, where specifically you might want to work, because the nature of the work will be very different depending on the organization.
For the research component, are you writing like a paper comparable to a thesis, and are you working with a research advisor? So
the question is, are you writing a thesis research paper, basically?
Thesis-like,
and do you have a research advisor? So you will have the two research director and research advisor through the Hart Fellows that you're working with, along with a faculty mentor that you select from Duke's faculty. Those people should be guiding you throughout your research process. And the research itself, community-based research, it's not necessarily true that you'll be producing some kind of paper at the end. Fellows often go on to do a number of things. Sometimes it's a creative output. Sometimes it is something written and more formal. It can look like a grant proposal that you've written, a report on the organization, a history of the organization. It can also be something creative like an art show. It can be workshops that you run. Last year we had a fellow, Sophia Chimbanda, who conducted oral histories with a local group of organizers. And at the end of her fellowship, she hosted a panel discussion where those people she had interviewed were able to share their stories in a Q&A panel with members of the community. And then she also has those oral histories she's recorded, which are going to be archived in the library.
Yeah, just to respond to that question, it doesn't have to be a thesis. Doing a thesis back to back that's crazy, in my opinion. But you can be very creative. Coralie, she's leaning towards like a documentary right now. My optimal outcome would be a new curriculum for teachers in Durham Public School as they prepare, as they get taught for preparing to teach classes. So they give you a plethora of different ways for you to present the work that you've done.
And our hope is that whatever that kind of output is at the end, it should be of tangible benefit to the community. So this is not a program, a fellowship, where you're coming in and doing some research that you're really interested in, just so that way you can publish a paper that has your name on it. It is actually supposed to help the community and the organization you're partnering with. Yes?
Do you work with a PI associated with a university, or does it have to be separate from academia?
Say a little bit more about that.
When I think of community partner, it seems not affiliated with a university or a school.
Yeah.
But if you found a research lab that was doing research that you're interested in, could you work with them, or are you suggesting it should be separate?
So, yes, kind of. Sorry. We do have 2 fellows this year. So we have 5 fellows this year. 2 of them are affiliated with universities. However, they are doing research in a more social science setting. So the research is not necessarily conducting experiments or even very intense interviews. It's more digging into different things that are happening in that community and then creating workshops or finding ways to present that work. It's really important, if you are working with a university, that you also have a kind of grassroots organization that you're partnering with to be really connected to the community, because it's so easy in academia to be disconnected from the communities that we care about and that we really want to be working with and supporting. What other questions for me or for Kylan?
So in terms of funding for transportation, say for example, if the student wanted to go something in London, but the student had a pay for
Yes. So the question is about funding transportation. Can you rent or buy a car? Is it transportation for a train? That kind of thing. You cannot use funding to buy a car. That is pretty, sorry? Okay. Yeah, so we're pretty clear that you can't buy a car. Renting a car, I think, would not be like the most cost-efficient way to plan your travel for a whole year. So I would recommend, as you're looking at places that you might want to be for your fellowship year, to go somewhere that has good public transportation, reliable buses or trains, or somewhere that you might already have a car. So Kylan is in Durham. Kylan has a car. I think we're covering your car insurance.
Yeah.
So, like, there's that. But yeah, it's just like a liability thing about buying things that go beyond ownership, extends past your fellowship. Doesn't work. Yes.
I know you mentioned that sometimes like Hart Fellows lean more towards like creative projects. I was just wondering, in terms of like funding, what funding is available for those creative projects?
Yeah, so we have like a set amount that we give each year, and it might vary year to year, but a set amount that we give each year that are specifically research-related expenses. So if you were trying to engage in something creative, perhaps you want to do a community workshop where everyone's building sculptures, you could use the cost of clay or whatever you needed as part of your research expenses.
That also covers like language, like learning expenses as well.
Yeah.
Like.
So I haven't opened like the application link yet, so maybe this is like something that's obvious. But for the proposal for our project or research, should it focus more on like the community partner we want to work with and like the idea of like how we want things to go and like the research we want to explore? Or should it be more like deliverable focused, like, oh, this is what I hope to like end with, especially since we don't know what that looks like yet, like especially with the like listening period.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's asking about the proposal. Should you focus more on the organization, more on like your goals, and how do you integrate the collaborative aspect into that proposal? So the proposal has 4 parts to it, questions that we've asked you to consider in your writing. This will help, I think, with kind of most of your question of how to approach the essay. But yeah, it is this tricky piece, right? Because you won't know until you get into a community exactly what that community needs. However, our expectation and our hope is that as you're putting together, as you're crafting this proposal, you are doing some research into the community, that maybe you already know something about that community to have an idea of what you think might be helpful. So, what's a good example of this? I'll use Rishabh as an example. He's our fellow who's in Columbia this year, working on
energy.
Yeah, conservation,
How it
energy
affects
with indigenous populations. So this is like a super interesting thing, really important. They're building wind farms off the coast of Columbia, and this is causing some issues and displacement in the indigenous communities there. And so Rishabh wrote about this in his fellowship proposal of how he wanted to study this and how he was curious about it. But of course, his idea is like, he has like one idea of how it would go. And then when he gets to the location, he starts interviewing people, meeting with people, seeing how everyone's living, like hearing personal stories. It's going to change a little bit. That's fine. That's the nature of how this program works. And we don't penalize you for not knowing things ahead of time. But I think, I don't know if that was actually the best example I could have given, but as you're crafting it, yeah, you should do some research into like what is important to that community right now and how you think it might be affecting them.
Yeah, I would say a good mantra is like lean towards just showcasing your passion for whatever community it is, and if you have to choose one of the two to kind of be a little bit more questionable about, maybe lean towards the deliverable. If you show your why and why this community or why this community partner, I think that will be more beneficial than just like a deliverable, hopefully.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, in the fellowship, we're investing in both you and the project. So if you are kind of getting stuck on this point, the proposal is also asking about you. Who are you? Why are you passionate about this? Why is this the next right step for you? What do you hope to get out of this? So, like, there's a good balance, and it is a lot to fit into 750 words, but the end result is usually something pretty sharp because you've had to distill it into such a short amount of space.
wondering if there are examples of Hart Fellows who have taken or who have sort of like used past projects and sort of continued the relationship that has been started from a previous Hart Fellow, and whether that's something that like, you all value versus like having originality in terms of the project that you're using.
Yeah. So the question is about continuity, basically. Have Hart Fellows been in an organization 1 year, and then maybe another Hart Fellow goes to that same organization a year or two later? That's not something that has necessarily happened recently, but it is kind of the foundation of the Hart Fellowship program. So this started as a program of sending students to conflict zones to do documentary work. We were sending people, I mean, even as recently as 10 years ago, we were sending people to Ukraine and to Syria to interview children who are affected and being displaced and doing documentary work in that. That type of work would need continuity year after year. So that's something definitely that we value. Yeah, but it's not something that we've done necessarily recently, but it's something we would be very happy to support. Yeah.
So you have office hours, and I'm curious whether if we're like between a few different, or like let's say we have 2 different project ideas, if that would be a good space to kind of talk to you about that, or if that's something we should kind of figure out on our own and speak to you about like the application process instead.
I'm happy in office hours to talk about your actual project idea. I won't read your essays or give feedback on how you're putting it together, but I think working as a conversation partner with you about, okay, why is it that this project is interesting to you, and why is it that this one's interesting? What might be a better fit? And giving you maybe some insight onto what is more in alignment, right, with Hart. Yeah. Do I see somebody else? Yeah.
So once the fellowship is over, is it common for the fellows to continue working with the community, or is it more common for them to go off and pursue different things?
Yeah, it really depends. We have people, there was someone a couple years ago who got an offer from that organization and continued and worked on with them and is still working with them. And then some people go on for law school, library science school, return home to work in their own communities, maybe implementing some of the things they learned in the communities they started in. So kind of all options are there.
To add on to that, the work that, because of that and because of how so many people end up not staying in the community or staying with the organization, a big focus is that the work that we do is sustainable. So we're trying to make an impact that lasts longer than the 10 months that we might be in the community.
You mentioned like returning home to your own community. Is there like an aversion to working in a community that you're from or that you're familiar with? I know obviously like you went to Duke for 4 years and you stayed in Durham. I don't know, do you guys have like preferences regarding that?
Yeah, so the fellowship really values creative dislocation as a core piece of being in the fellowship. So what this means is being in a place that is entirely new to you, or being in a place that is familiar to you in an entirely new way. I'm sure Kylan can jump in and say that being in Durham as not a Duke student is, yeah, do you want to talk about what that's like?
Yeah, it's definitely different. You kind of feel like an old head, like whenever you come to Duke, so it's like kind of weird. But just like my day-to-day, like even like what I eat, you know, Woo is such a like unappreciated blessing that I've learned how to cook, or trying to, and I've had to, you know, explore more Durham restaurants, stuff like that. I will say, you know, if you want to go back home or stay in Durham, just make sure that it makes sense why you would want to. So, for instance, for my project, Durham has a lot of youth-led or youth-based community programs, and Durham Public Schools and kind of the surrounding counties, their school programs are like pretty good, and they're kind of setting the example for southern regions for what a more equitable education experience can look like. So that's why it kind of made sense for Durham. But yeah, even if you decide to stay in Durham or stay in your hometown, it will be a brand new perspective.
Yeah. So if you wanted to return to your hometown, it would be something you'd have to make a strong case for. I'm pretty sure that we would not support you like living with your parents or living with your siblings, because that is not like meaningfully different, even though it is like different from being a student and living at home. It's not different enough. I would really encourage you to look beyond. It's great to go back to your hometown, but this fellowship is an opportunity at a time in your life when most of you don't have a lot of responsibilities that require you to be in that place. As you get older, it will be harder and at some point nearly impossible to move away from your family, to move away from your community. And this is a chance for you to go somewhere new, to lean into discomfort, to be somewhere where maybe the language that's spoken around you every day is not your native language, to experience some isolation in new ways. And it will be challenging, but it will also be transformational. And you will change and grow so much as a person. The fellowship is, like, one of the things I think is really beautiful about the fellowship is that it gives you this year to really set the stage for what comes next. You're learning, you're growing in a community that's unfamiliar to you, you're being exposed to different social and cultural values in a lot of cases. You're struggling with, or maybe hopefully not struggling too much, but you're experiencing isolation, you're experiencing ways that you are both outsider and insider in a community, and all of this will help shape your career going forward and how you end up pursuing what it is that you're really passionate about in a more sustainable way that you make a long-term career out of. Yeah.
When it comes to references for people who come pretty far from Sanford, what might like the academic reference or professional reference look like?
Yeah. So yes. So asking about letters of recommendation, references, is it okay if they're not from Sanford, and what does that look like? It's definitely okay if it has nothing, if your letter of recommendation, if the professor has nothing to do with the public policy school, that's completely fine. When you're thinking about who to ask for a letter of recommendation, I would ask a professor who knows you and your work well, who can speak to not only that you took a class and you got a good grade, but that you're insightful, thoughtful, that you've attended office hours perhaps, that you've worked on them, maybe worked with them on a Best Connections project, something like that, so they've had like a closer conversation with you. You can also ask other academic advisors or people at this institution that you've connected with. So that there's a lot of opportunity there to ask different people. For the letters of for the references, we ask for one academic and one professional. The letter of recommendation, to clarify, doesn't have to come from a professor, but those are often like pretty strong. The references, we ask for one academic and one professional, and I think same thing applies, just somebody who knows your work. The professional reference is great if you had like an internship supervisor who you really got along with and who knows you well. Yeah.
Since there's there can be a creative component to it, is there space to like upload some sort of portfolio or examples of some sort of work that you may want to do for the fellowship?
Ooh, okay. So the question is about uploading a portfolio as part of your application. I think what you could do is you could link to something in your resume if you are proposing a creative project. But again, like, we're not evaluating you as an artist, right? We're not saying like, oh, actually, you're a photographer and these photos are not good, like you can't have the fellowship. That's not the point. But if you want to link to some of your work in your resume, that's completely fine. Yeah.
Yeah, just another example. I like bragging on my cohort members, if you can't tell, but Corley, again, I think she did some dance group while she was here, maybe Nagasaki or Street Med, I don't know, but I think she kind of leaned into that for her project, with it being about dance styles and stuff like that. So you can make the connection, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do have like, not a preference, but like we really love creative projects because art is political and it's meaningful and important. What other questions? Anything else? Yeah.
Fellows in a role where they're already getting paid? Like usually is the Hart Fellowship their open source income?
So the question is, can you be paid by your partner organization? And yes, you can be paid by your partner organization. We would just want to have a conversation about what does that funding look like, how much is it, and how does it supplement or maybe diminish your stipend from us a little bit. Something that they do in the Peace Corps is that you are not allowed to make more, if you're a U.S. Peace Corps person, you're serving in a foreign country, you're not allowed to make more than your counterpart who is from that country. And so if you are living in Chile as a Peace Corps member, you can't make more than someone who is Chilean who's living there and doing the same work as you. I think something like that is like a good way to think about the funding for the Hart Fellowship.
Also with that, just being on payroll with the organization comes with, just the added responsibility of whatever hours they want you to work compared to, it's a little bit more flexible. You enter into an organization a little bit more flexible whenever your pay is already covered by Hart and you're able to say whatever, you're not limited to whatever hours they give you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So there can be pros and cons, and it's definitely something that I would encourage you to come speak to me about if you're curious about it. And if you think that your organization would pay you or supplement your stipend in some way, it can also be helpful to share that in the application just so we have a clear understanding of the work that you would be doing. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, did the bee come back?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Just to kind of level out a couple of things we were talking about, because you said your project could be a continuation of work you've potentially done as an undergrad, but also prioritizing this idea of creative dislocation. If you were to want to go back to a place where maybe you've done a Hart leadership program or a community-based internship before, would that kind of balance out the fact that you weren't necessarily creatively dislocating yourself from where you've been before?
I think that is a more nuanced conversation that'll depend on each person, so we can meet in office hours to talk about that.
Just to throw in, the organization I'm working with, I also did a little bit of my soul work with, which was a different Hart leadership program. They weren't my community partner then, but they were my practitioner interview, if that makes sense. So I would say don't scratch it off, but you would have to bring a different level to it with the work that you did with them. It couldn't just be a repeat, of course.
Gotcha.
Well, and it would of course be deeper because you're there for a whole year.
Yeah.
Or 10 months. Yes.
I just had a question about the timeline. Do Hart fellows start at different times, based on what the community partner needs, or is there a set start time for?
Yes. So the fellowship runs from July 1st to May 1st the following year. Fellows typically launch sometime between July 1st and August 1st, and we're pretty solid on that timing. And that's because we don't want you to get out of step with each other, right? So where Kylan is at is also where Coralie is at, is also where Rishab is at, and Ruthie. And Ashley. Sorry, Ashley. Yeah. So you're able to kind of relate to each other better because you're kind of all experiencing different things at a similar time, and they all have a similar flavor to them, even though you're in different organizations and places.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a little perfect window to, kind of say your goodbyes to your family or whatever, because orientation for the Hart Fellowship happens after graduation, or it did for us, and so that's late May-ish, and then you kind of have June to prepare, relax, kind of chill, and then July, you get to it.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? All right. Well, I'll stick around for a few minutes. you are welcome to come stop and talk to me or schedule office hours with me. The link to our application is here. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. It was great to talk with you about this and hear your questions. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have anything else that comes up.